Hey, what's up, people? I've got this Razer Deathadder V2, and this is an optical mouse that my kid uses on his PC. And it's developed a bit of an unusual fault. And I will show you what the fault is, what it's doing, and how I found it, and then we'll see if there's anything we can do about it. So let me do a little bit of setup, and I'll see if I can demonstrate what it's doing. You may have noticed this piece of green tape that I stuck to the mouse cable. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the USB plug and I'm going to plug it into this USB extension that's plugged into this PC that I'm currently at. So the mouse, there we go. It lights up like a Christmas tree like we would expect because it's got the RGBs. So at the moment, I can move this around and I can see the cursor moving on my screen just fine. But if I squeeze on this area where I've got the tape, I'm also recording the display, the front of the display on the corner so we can see. And now it's not going to want to act up anymore. Of course. Okay, there we go. Finally. So yeah, it fails to reconnect sometimes. And now, as you can see, I'm wiggling it around and the cursor is not moving at all. So yeah, there's something wrong with the wires in this portion of the cable, which unfortunately is like right somewhere in the smack dab in the middle of the in between the mouse and the connector. Usually the most common type of fault that I've seen on a mouse is where the wires will internally like break or fray right at the strain relief, like where the mouse, kind of makes the most movements like this. So when it started acting up, I thought that that's where the issue was. But occasionally it would work, so I couldn't, I would wiggle it around and that wouldn't cause any problems. So I thought, okay, maybe it's on the other end, so I would wiggle that around and that wouldn't cause any problems. And when I brought the mouse to my bench to, try to figure it out, I could not get it to act up again, so I gave it back to my kid and he used it just fine for a few weeks. But now it's acting up again. So finally, after doing some testing, I found that the issue is like right in this spot. So I've already taken the screws off the mouse so that I could just quickly open it up. And on one end of the cable, there is a connector. And I can pull the rest of the cable out. So let me show you how I found the fault. So initially, I thought that maybe there's just a broken wire inside of the jacket. And that's what's causing issues when we kind of move it around. So I took this USB connector and I took turns clipping this test lead onto, like the various pins so I could see if there was continuity from this end of the cable all the way to the connector inside the mouse. And for this, I'm not going to capture the display directly to the PC because it's going to update like way too slow. So if we take turns, like touching each end of this connector over to this side of the connector, we can see that for pretty much every single wire, we do have continuity. So that's the white one. This is the green one. And this is the black one. And also we can check the external grounding. So if we check that, we see that we also have continuity there. So it would appear that the cable's working just fine. And if I try that same test while wiggling around in this area, I do not get continuity to break. However, if I clip this one to what would be the white wire under normal circumstances, if I connect this lead over to the jacket ground and I squeeze in this area, there it is right there. We can see that occasionally there's continuity between the white wire and it's the shielding ground. So occasionally this makes contact and that's when the mouse starts acting up. So somewhere inside this area is where the wires are damaged and it's allowing the white one to make contact with what I'm going to guess is like either braided shielding or just kind of like wire wrapped around like everything else. So let's take this portion. I'm going to cut a chunk of it out and let's carefully take it apart and we'll see if we can figure out where the damage actually is. Okay, so I'm going to cut about, I don't know, maybe like a Subway sandwich's worth of length from this cable. So I'm going to snip it over on this end, and I will snip it on this side. So if we take a look at the construction, we can see that it's got a cloth covering, and then it's got this braided shielding inside. And then we've got the 4 wires that actually do like carrying up the data and all that. And it looks like there's actually, I thought there was only going to be 4. There's 5. Oh, no, that's not a yellow wire. That's just like the ripcord stuff. Okay, so yeah, there's only 4 conductors inside. So let's pull this entire thing out. And let's see if we can figure out where that white wire is damaged. And this thing could stop losing focus. That would be nice. And check it out. There it is. So I'm actually starting to think that this probably wasn't the fault that developed. It was probably a rabbit. There isn't a whole lot of damage on the cloth covering. This is like around the area where that break is. But you can kind of see how there's sort of like a little bit of a defined line right there. So I think he must have, like, this must have been dangling under the desk, and, a rabbit just kind of likes to go everywhere. I tell my kid to try to keep cables off the ground and stuff like that, but this may have been dangling a little low. Rabbit probably came up to it and just gave it a little bit of a nibble there. So he didn't completely cut through it, but it was enough to expose the white wire. And so because the shielding just kind of covers everything, it was enough to where occasionally that would make contact with the shielding, and that would cause the mouse to disconnect and stop responding. So I thought that the fault was going to be that maybe the jacket on like the wire had like deteriorated or something, but no, this appears to be more like physical damage. All right, so what can we do about it? Well, unfortunately, because the damage was like almost right in the middle of the entire length of the cable, that doesn't leave me enough material or enough cable length to be able to, say, like attach this end to this end, and we can still use the what's left to be able to plug it into the PC. It's too short. So what I'm going to have to do in this case is get like a replacement cable and attach it to the wires on this end. I could splice onto this side, but I think I would rather keep this as like one entire length of cable. So I'm just going to get another USB cable that I can like butcher the other end off, and I'll show how I would go about fixing something like this. Although I'm just realizing that where the cable comes into the strain relief and where it actually comes out on this other end isn't exactly in line. So that's going to make things a little more difficult, but let's see what we can do about it. Ah, crap, I missed. Unfortunately, I didn't have any cable on hand that I could butcher for this project. And we have a nearby grocery store that usually sells like discounted, like knickknacks and stuff like that. Sometimes they have USB cables that you can get for like $3 or $4, but they were completely out of stock. So I ended up going to Harbor Freight for this one. This was like a $7 cable. It's a micro USB end, and it's 6 feet long. It claims that it's strong, that it's flexible, and that it's durable. So, as long as it works, I guess we're cool. It actually shows a diagram of what it's supposedly constructed like, so I guess we'll see once we cut it open. So according to this diagram, it says that it's got the polyester weave, it's got a PVC jacket, it's got copper shielding, aluminum shielding, HDPE insulation for the individual wires, it's got 28 gauge wires, and it says PVC insulation. I'm guessing that's probably going to be like the positive. The only thing here that's going to make things a little stiffer is going to be this PVC jacket. The original cable doesn't have that, so it's able to be like a lot more flexible and softer. So it's flexible enough. I think it's not going to be too bad. The mouse is going to be like, say, in this position, and the cable's going to go back. So it should be okay. Snip. And that's what the cross section looks like. That red one is definitely a lot bigger than the other ones. The outside cloth covering is quickly fraying, so just to prevent it from going too far, going to put some tape down a little ways. And this was terrible tape placement. It'll do. Okay, so I'm just going to slice around the cloth covering. I want to remove some of this. I don't want to keep it all the way to the end. I try to be gentle. I don't want to slice through the wires. I do want to slice through that internal white jacket. And there we go. So that exposes the shielding. It's not even really braided. It's more like it's twisted around the aluminum covering. It's got a lot of golden hair inside. Okay, so this aluminum stuff can come off. Okay, so there's all the cables or the wires that we're actually going to use. And this red one is actually pretty thick, so it looks like this cable could definitely carry quite a bit of current if that's what you needed. For the mouse, it's only like a few hundred milliamps, I believe, so definitely does not need to have like this thick gauge of cable or wiring. And this cable is definitely way overkill for this application, and it's going to be a bit bigger than what I really wanted. So what I'm thinking of doing is drilling out well, first of all, removing this cable from the strain relief, and then drilling out the strain relief so I can get this cable to go pretty much all the way through so that these wires are coming out of the end. I'm definitely not going to be able to get them to go out this way, so I'm going to have to drill it completely straight through so that the cables come out like right there, right on the end. And then I've got to get this to go, like all the way through like that. And then we'll splice. I'll probably cut them off like over, like right there, right at the end, so that I have plenty of wire to splice into. I'd rather leave some extra, just maybe, for like the future. So I'm going to start by snipping it off right there on the end. And let's see if I can pull this back. Looks like the cloth wiring is like molded into the strain relief or together with it. So this is probably going to be a little difficult. Oh, I finally got it, but it was kind of off camera because I pulled it towards me. So I didn't get it on video, but finally was able to pull it completely out. So that is a strain relief, completely cable free. And let's try to drill a hole through this. I'm going to hold it with some pliers. The diameter of the drill bit's just a little bit bigger than the diameter of the cable. That way, hopefully, I can get it through with no issues. So let's see if I don't end up breaking the this strain relief more than I want to. I'm going slowly. Let's back it up a little bit. No, it's trying to twist. Okay. Yeah, that's starting to come out the side right there, or on the bottom. So this isn't exactly going to plan. I think there's actually something inside of the strain relief that was holding the original cable in there. This might be like a small crimp ring, and that's why it was so difficult to pull out. Yeah, it is. That's why I couldn't get the cable out, and it just flew off. All right, change of plans. I'm not going to continue drilling this strain relief because it feels like it's going to break right at this neck part of the strain relief. So what I decided to do instead is design a similar piece to what's going to be inside the mouse and print it out. So this is what that looks like, except that this is not going to be the actual part I'm going to use because I ended up making this circular part a little too small. So I'm going to use this instead. This is a little bit bigger, both the outside diameter and on the inside where the cable goes in. So on the end where it's open, I designed it so that it's got a fillet so that it's curved, as you can see in this 3D view of the part. So that way, when the cable comes out, it doesn't have like a very rigid circular piece that it has to conform to. It actually has a bit of give so that it can bend outwards and, like any angle. And hopefully that should prevent it from like breaking too prematurely. So I've already stuck this piece so that you can see what it looks like. So this actually went through without any major issues. So this is the one that I'm going to use for the actual cable that I'm going to use for the mouse. And I can get this through now, except that I'm going to slice a bit of this stuff off the end that like frayed a bunch. Okay, this does not want to go through. It's bunching up at the end. So I think I'm going to have to do what I did on this one is that because they were already kind of frayed out, I sort of like squeezed them together at the end. And because they are a little bit further than the actual wires are, I was able to compress them a bit, and then I was able to push it through because I did not struggle with this one, but I'm struggling with this one for sure. So I'm going to have to cut this off, which I didn't want to do, but oh well. Okay, that was definitely a little bit easier. Still a bit of a tight fit because I made it so that it's just enough to grip this cable. I didn't want it to be like too sloppy inside. So let's see if I can grab it from the end now and pull some of it out. There we go. All right, I think that should be just about enough wire to go and make it all the way from the back to the front of the mouse. And I got plenty of material there to work with. So now what I'm going to do is just pull a little bit more of this material out. What I want to do is put a little bit of CA or cyanoacrylate or super glue on this the outer cloth sleeve, and then pull it back just a little bit so that the cable and this retainer piece gets glued together. So that way this cable cannot be like pulled in or pulled out or be pushed in at all. And that should make it a very strong hold there. So I think this is going to work out pretty well. Okay, so I'm going to put a bit of glue all the way around the cabling. I basically want that cabling to, or the the glue to be inside of that retainer once I pull it back. So right about there. So that should be my glue got glued, or my finger got glued to it. So that's going to definitely be like really secure once it sets, and I already can't move it and my finger's glued again. All right, I probably should have waited to glue this in place, because now I have to score the outer jacket, the cloth covering, and I also have to score the inner one and pull both of those off without cutting any of the wiring. So I'm going to have to be super careful now. And if I hadn't glued it in place, then if I had messed up, I could, pull some more through. But sometimes I don't think about things as I'm doing them. So I'm just going to try to be careful and do this. Cool. There we go. Yeah, that's going to work. Now, I really don't need all of this shielding. I really only need a small amount, so I'm going to cut off the majority of it. Just leave enough there to be able to connect to the shielding on the original connector inside. I'm also going to remove one of the grounds, because I really only need one of them also. So this is all the extra stuff that I'm going to cut off. That way I don't have like a lot of bulk of wire running from the back to the front of the mouse. Okay, one thing I am going to do is I'm going to put a piece of heat shrink over the, what would be technically the negative side wire, and just cover that up a bit. I'm going to go more towards the end. The rest of this I'm going to cover up with a sleeve of a heat shrink. All right, there we go. It's definitely a bit bulkier than the original, but I don't have much of a choice, so it's going to have to remain that way. So now I got to figure out where I can guide the wire through. And I mean, there's some spots there. Yeah, looks like that's going to work. I was a little worried that the cable coming out of the end of that retainer was going to interfere with the wheel, but it's not. And the wire's not bulky or too bulky that it interferes with the board touching down to the bottom. So yeah, this is going to work. Okay, so I've got all the power and data lines spliced together. And I've placed a piece of heat shrink that I can now slide over all of these solder joints. And then I just need to give those a shrink, and those should all be protected. And I just realized I forgot to put the piece of heat shrink that I was going to use to cover all of this up on the cable before I put it on. I was going to use this piece to cover up this entire section, but oh boy. If I depin this side, I might be able to push it through. Let's see. Okay, looks like this is just barely going to work. I can put 3 together, then put 2 more behind those. All right, I got lucky this time, but this doesn't always turn out good. I still have to solder the shielding together, but I want to wrap this around these 4 wires first. All right, I was able to get it through. So now I want to wrap this around these. And find somewhere where I can join them together, like right around there. All right, there we go. Okay, now let's see if I can slide this back over everything again. Yay, there we go. All right, that's it. And like I said, this is definitely way longer than it needs to be. But I wanted to leave enough slack on this side in case I ever need to do anything with it again. I still have enough wiring left on the connector side. So this entire thing is going to have to get tucked into the mouse, but there's plenty of room inside, so I'm not too worried about that part. Okay, so I've got the board screwed back onto the base, and this is the cable that goes to the board. It looks a little absurdly long, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold it over and maybe zip tie it together, like in this area. That should keep it out of the way of anything else. But for the time being, I just want to test it, make sure that it's actually going to be recognized and that I didn't mess up on the wiring, which I shouldn't have, but I don't know. I've done worse, I guess. Let me see. I'm not going to bother recording the video. I'll just let you know if it comes up or not. But this should light up. There it goes. Yep, it's recognized and it's working. So, well, actually here, I can do that. Yep, it's working. Cool. Well, I'm glad I didn't mess up because I did not want to have to undo this all over again. So I'm just going to put a nice little blue zip tie inside that nobody's going to be able to see. Give it the old snip snip. There we go. I was getting a little worried there that this was going to interfere with that, but it can tuck into the side just like that. Everything feels okay. Nothing interfering with the wheel. Cool. All I have to do is put the screws back on. And there's the third screw. Nothing funky. Everything feels okay. Yeah, once this cable is like fully extended, not even going to be able to notice that it's like really stiff. So I think that's going to work out pretty good. Let's see if these pads are still sticky enough to go back on. If not, I'm going to have to put some more adhesive on them, but that feels pretty good. All right, there we go. Mouse, well, I mean, it's a Deathadder, so I guess it's a snake mouse. Either way, it has a new tail, and it's got no bite marks on it because I didn't bite it while I was here on the bench. I resisted the urge to chew it up myself. So there we go. That's going to do it for this one. So thank you all for watching once again. I will see you guys around the bench.